Welcome to the Dark Side of Soul podcast. This is Joe.
This is Sean.
I had to make sure I was where I was today. Okay.
One of those days.
It's always one of those days. It's always. I had to make sure I was introducing the right podcast. I was like, did I do it right? I'm always doing that.
Is Sean a guest on Soul podcast this time? What's going on?
What is it? What's happening? Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm just going to get right into it. We're talking about mysterious deaths in Korea, and like many topics, we think, oh yeah, this will be a topic that we're interested in, and we'll just get a quick show. And then it turns into a giant monster because we're going to have to do a lot of shows on this one.
Yeah.
This is very much the dark side of Korea type of episode. But if you enjoy our show, also point out that we run the Dark Side of Soul Ghost Walk. It is currently in operation. You can book directly through our website at darksideofsoul.com. It works out better that way. I mean, yes, you could do it through TripAdvisor and all those other platforms, but they take a cut.
Why give them money?
Why give them money? Yeah, in fact, inside scoop, TripAdvisor finally is doing something everyone was scared they would do a long time ago. In order to appear on the top rankings, you have to pay a fee first.
Horse crap.
Yeah.
And their whole system was set up against that kind of thing. It was kind of fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now they're saying like, you have to be evaluated. They will evaluate your tour and put it into the great tours category. But in order for them to evaluate it, you got to pay them $29 per tour.
Horse crap. Yeah.
So
it sucks. Corporations, man. Let's toss them in when we have a revolution.
Thing is, real easily, I'll just drop down to $29. I mean, we're one of the most highly rated tours in Seoul for TripAdvisor. So,
oh yeah, we're usually in the top, at least number one for nightlife, right?
Well, yeah, number one for nightlife.
And that's pretty good considering Seoul has a pretty pumping nightlife.
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out how we ended up in that category. I think I did that by accident when they said, "What categories does your product fit in?" Well, we're at nightlife. We're at night, so I put it in nightlife, and we got number one.
Yeah, well, there you go. See, if you put us in another category, it may not have been number one.
I guess other nightlife venues, people were just too drunk and hungover to review.
Right. Some people get drunk on our tours, though. Let's be fair.
It is a tradition.
Yeah.
To drink on the tour. It is also occasional to show up completely smashed on the tour.
I've had that a couple times. I've had people get sick on the tour as well.
Yes, you have.
Twice.
I've gotten sick on the tour once.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You told me that story.
Yeah, it was just one-on-one, and I just had a little bathroom issue, and I took care of it, and I was fine for the rest of the tour. But that's always a big fear, is like you're going to start a tour and then suddenly it's like, oh crap, I hope I survive. Yeah.
One thing for me is kind of judging how long before the tour can I eat without feeling gassy after. So I definitely try to eat an hour before I start a tour. Any less than that, then if I start walking and talking, I get burpy. It's like, oh, this isn't good.
You're like Rick and Rick and Morty. Okay.
Yeah. And this here is the Kyung Gun. Built in 1620.
Gosh. Man, it makes me want to crucify you.
My Lord.
That's what we call a segue. But also, before we talk about this, we also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/Dark Side of Soul, where we regularly host horror movie watch parties with other fans of the tour. It's a group. It's a fun group. Yeah. And also contact Sean with your supernatural experiences.
Yes, send us a message on Facebook is the best way to do it. And if you've had any kind of supernatural experience or believe you have had a supernatural experience while in Korea, that's the only real stipulation. It has have to have it had to have happened in Korea. If it's good, I'll talk to you about it. I'll collect it, and we're putting together a book we're going to hope to publish in the future of modern ghost experiences in Korea.
Wouldn't you
not
like
just
that?
Seoul. And not just Seoul, because I've collected a good 15 stories so far, on top of the ones that we've already recorded from the tours, the alleged experiences people have said they've had. And not all of them are in Seoul.
Yeah, even though Seoul is Korea.
Yes. But dark side of Seoul, so dark side of
Korea. But, yeah, we'll do that.
We'll do that.
All right. So tell me, today's topic is mysterious deaths.
Yeah. Always a weird. It's I think my first introduction to the idea of people dying mysteriously was Unsolved Mysteries. Maybe for a lot of people.
It's in the title.
Yeah, well, Unsolved Mystery, that's also theft and grand theft and things like that. Also UFO encounters.
And Robert Stack.
And Robert Stack, yeah. Talk about good voices, Robert Stack.
Unsolved.
So,
I can't even do it. I can't.
No, he has this
imitate his voice.
It's gravelly. But
wasn't he an airplane?
Yeah, he was an airplane.
Okay,
that's right. Yeah, he was also in the Untouchables, the old one. From the 50s. Yeah, classic actor. But yeah, on that show, a lot of times they would show mysterious deaths, people that died mysteriously. There are a lot of cases around the world now. Well, not now, but continuously, still around the world, of unsolved deaths, weird, bizarre situations, circumstances under which people have died, and still we have no idea how the deaths occurred. And Korea has their fair share.
Yeah, you can see them all on Surprise.
On what? Sorry?
Surprise.
What's that?
Oh, Surprise?
Surprise. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Yeah.
This is a Korean TV show that's usually on Sundays, and it's been around for over a decade, and it's notoriously bad.
Oh, really? Okay.
Okay, Surprise. Oh, okay. I'm going off on a tangent here. Okay, Surprise started off as kind of like an Unsolved Mysteries. They would have a panel of C-list celebrities, like a lot of Korean shows do, and they would show different stories, and the panelists had to figure out which ones were true, which ones were false.
Oh, I see.
Then it just got so popular they got rid of the whole true false thing and just been a sort of do you know thing. But Surprise, even though the Korean stories are fairly good, but the ones that have to deal with foreign stories tend to be extremely goofy. I was asked to be on the show once. I didn't do it, but a couple of friends of mine have been on the show as actors. And they mostly hire Russians to play all the foreign characters because there's a Russian casting agent they usually go through for the show. But what I also find funny is they use the same wig on it's the same very curly gray wig that's used for Mark Twain, that's used for JFK,
Einstein,
for Harry Truman, even though he was bald. I mean, not Harry Truman, I was thinking Eisenhower. Yeah, it's just, I call it the surprise wig. And it's just, I ask anyone I know who's ever been on the show, it's like, did you ever get to wear the surprise wig? Because it gets passed around to everyone. And it's just funny because there was one about the Cuban Missile Crisis, and hearing JFK with a Russian accent was pretty surreal.
That is weird. That's bizarre. Cold War, considering the Cold War and everything. Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. And that's the surprise right there. Yeah,
and it's all the little details. I know it's a low budget show. They only, I think they pay the actors like $500 per show, which is very low for an acting gig that will take up your entire weekend.
You got to wear a dumb wig.
But they got to wear the surprise wig, and the locations they have to try to find to make it look like not Korea. And these things are pretty funny. It's usually, if people don't know, if you see a foreign looking location, it's usually one of the English villages.
Up here, like up in Paju or something like that.
And Paju is the big one. I live next to the one. I don't think it still exists. It's still in operation. The one in Incheon. And I used to do a show, and we used to film at the Incheon English Village just to make something look foreign. Yeah, it was there.
Interesting. So some of these stories then are like on Mysterious Deaths are on that show.
Yeah, there'll be that on there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The foreign stuff is like, I look at that and go, oh yeah, that's an old story, or that's been debunked. Why are they showing that?
Right. Okay. Well, anyway, so Korea does have several mysterious deaths. And one this is probably the first one that really attracted me in Korea. And it happened, I was already in Korea for 11 years when this happened, but it was a man who allegedly crucified himself, or he was found crucified in an abandoned rock quarry, a stone quarry, around Easter 2011.
2011. Okay.
They found his body on May 1st that year. So that was about a week or so.
What is this about May 1st? We keep talking about that. Keeps popping up on
May Day. That's
episode.
right. That was our last episode. There was something about May Day. That's right.
Yeah, that was the founding of the Unification Church. Yeah.
Right. There you go. Now, see. Well, let's get back to that then, because that's something that's never been brought up before in my kind of research of this story.
Sung Young Moon killed this guy 1 year before he died. All right.
Right. Yeah. Well, so it was a taxi driver. They've only ever released his surname, which is Kim, and he was 58 years old. Kind of listed as a fanatical Christian.
You said taxi driver too, right?
Yes, he was a taxi driver. Yeah. And so he was found crucified on a wooden cross in the quarry in Mungyong in Gyeongsangbuk-do. And there were two smaller crosses next to him. So it was the crucifixion scene of Christ. And then he was center stage, and he was Brian. I mean, Christ.
I know. I was going to say, or he's recreating always
Life
look
of
on
Brian.
the bright side of life.
That's right. And it went awry. But let's stop joking about this poor young man, this poor man who died on the cross.
Poor young man, 58-year-old.
This poor old man who died on the cross.
Kim. All right.
Right. So, but yeah, so it was definitely a recreation of the crucifixion of the crucifixion of Christ, because Christ wasn't like not near the first person or last who was ever crucified.
Okay, I'm glad we staved off the crucifixion lobby right there.
Right. But yeah, no, he was like in full regalia. He had a crown of thorns. His hands and feet were nailed to the cross.
Ooh.
He had a stab wound in his side, his abdomen.
He did that to himself.
And allegedly, yeah. So I'll get into that. So the stab wound, which was, I think the Bible says it was Lucius, the soldier Lucius, that was the guy's name.
Light.
Something like that, who stabbed Christ in the side in the story. Interestingly, he had nylon strings tied around his neck. And,
well, maybe the nails weren't working well.
Well, probably in some way to keep him up. Yeah, perhaps. But anyway, this was tied around his neck, nylon strings. I don't think they had nylon back in the days of Christ when he was crucified. But anyway, the nylon strings tied around this guy's neck, and is around the neck and around the cross itself. And he was only wearing his underwear.
Holy underwear.
Yeah, I guess. So the police investigated. He was found. He was on the cross for several days when he was finally discovered. And yeah, so it's gonna be like a rank fish market when they saw him. Oh man. Yeah, definitely. His body would have been decomposed because it was spring. It was a rock quarry, so there was no trees, there's no shade. Definitely would have been in the sun. Probably a lot of animals and whatnot would have gathered around as well. Definitely birds. So, but the police agency, the Gyeongsangbuk-do, the provincial police agency, concluded that he did it all himself. Completed that he took his own life. And he had no assistance. Now, there was some, at the time when I started reading about it was a couple of years after, maybe a year or so after it happened, that I started reading about it. And I did find an article that suggested that maybe he had an accomplice, but they didn't go into any more detail. Apparently, the final police conclusion was he had no assistance, did it all himself.
Or he had a pre-existing condition.
Well, I will actually, I will get into that. In a little bit, yeah. So this means if he did all this himself, this means that, okay, he prepared it. He built the cross himself. That's fine to think. That's okay. No problem. Yeah. Okay. That's fine.
Built the cross himself. Okay.
Carpenter. Right. And he, that means he would have climbed up on the cross himself. He would have tied his neck around the cross with those nylon strings himself. He would have stabbed himself in the side, and bleeding profusely, still had the wherewithal and the strength to drill holes in both of his hands after he had already nailed his feet to the cross. And with the holes in his hands, he would have placed them through nails that were already nailed into the cross.
And they found no meth in his system.
Well, yeah, I don't think an autopsy was very likely conducted because of an official cause of death was loss of blood.
Yeah,
it definitely wasn't meth, not in Korea.
I know, just trying to think of some people, I guess, on high on amphetamines or something.
Yeah, so yeah, he would have had to have done all that himself. So that's pretty sketchy in and of itself. But other things that they found at the site, they did find Kim's SUV. They found his truck. They found the hammer and the nails. They found the drill and instructions on how to build a cross. Fair enough.
Okay.
But they found a tent. And this seems interesting because this means that he may have been there planning it, or he and his accomplice may have been planning it. Something I haven't been able to find is how big was that tent? So I do think the tent size could have been able to give clues into whether he had an accomplice or not. Because if two people had slept there, they wouldn't have been able to fit into a single-man tent. So how big was the tent? Single-man tents are not really easy to find in Korea, especially in 2011. Believe me, I tried.
Yeah, everything's glamping.
It's all glamping. And
which at my age, I don't mind. I don't mind glamping.
I still do.
I was always like camping. Yeah, it's called roughing it for a reason, but now I'm kind of like, no. Okay, roughing it. That was when I was in my teens.
I call glamping hanging out. Hanging out with booze. But anyway, and so they found all those things, and there was one report at the time that I read a couple of years later when I was continually going back to this case with this poor man Kim, crucified on the cross. One report suggested that that at the scene there was a note in his handwriting, detailing the process of self-crucifixion. But I only found that in one report, and it didn't cite any sources. So I don't know if that was something that someone came up with, someone else had heard, something that someone may have found through investigating on their own. A lot of these cases are investigated by individual investigators, people who are just interested in this kind of thing. They'd go and visit those sites because it was in Mungyong. So how many abandoned stone quarries, rock quarries are in Mungyong? It's probably a fairly easy place to find. So that's basically the situation of the case. That's how it was depicted in the media. But the result was, by the investigation, the police concluded after their investigation that an adult male was able to do what Kim allegedly had done. So everything that I just said, nailing them, getting up on the cross, tying, nailing their feet first, then tying their neck around with the nylon strings, and then drilling holes in their hands, all that stuff allegedly, according to the police, a grown male is capable of doing.
We're going to find,
I don't know about you, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think I'd be able to do any of that.
Yeah, but I think we're finding out that Korean police stations tend to be the clearinghouse for superhuman events, superhuman feats. Is their investigations, their findings and investigations show that, oh my God, there are some superhumans among us that are able to do these things.
Unbreakable. Yeah, well, and we know when we talked in our episode about missing persons way back, we mentioned briefly in that how when we talk about the Frog Boys, how I know someone who is good friends with the chief investigator, who was one of the chief investigators when that initially happened. And he suggested that we should turn this into a homicide case. And then the police force was like, no, shut your mouth, be quiet, don't bring up homicide. And it turned out he was right. And when they found those poor kids, they found them like 12 years later, found their bodies. They were murdered. So the gaffes by police. Now, I'm very irreverent when it comes to a lot of people in authority. I'm irreverent of aristocracy, of royalty, and government, and most certainly I'm very irreverent of the police. I think the police are often incompetent, and when they make gaffes, it's because they're not able to find a solution to a unusual situation, and so they may receive pressure to come up with a solution, so they find anyone. And that also happened with...
I found out with my story too on that episode too. Yeah, they were just under pressure to just wrap up the investigation and move on.
That's right. Same thing basically happened with what they were doing during the investigations of the Hwasong murders. They eventually found Lee Chun-jae was the killer of that. They just found him last year. So all these mess ups that the police do. So I definitely think they messed up here, but not a mess up so much as that they wrote this official report and it's like, yep, that's what happened according to our investigation. But wow. I don't believe any of it. So some other things that the police said in their investigation was that the man, Kim's deep religious faith helped him to endure the pain. It's like, what a ridiculous thing to say. You have to have a little bit more than that. You can't just say that. There has to be some foundation. If you're investigating, what are the sources that they're drawing from? They couldn't draw that from Kim himself. Of course, he was dead. But what sources did they get that from? They're like, oh, yeah, he was a devout Christian, so he can overcome pain. So it just doesn't fly. So no. There are several things about the investigation that seem suspect to me. First one is that I think he definitely had an accomplice. I don't think he did it himself. Or it may have been a murder. Excuse me.
May have been a murder, but yeah, but could have just very likely did it. I mean, he wanted to, and someone helped him.
Yeah, no, I think that's most likely. I think a murder is unlikely because the kind of murder that it would have been was it's almost from Seven, the movie Seven. Mm-hmm. Very dramatic and, large scale cinematic. Any murder like that would have been carried out. Other murders would have been carried out in a very similar
my thinking
fashion.
is that this person would be an artist and a performance artist and would want to try to do this again.
Exactly. Right. So, but unless the culprit was arrested for an unrelated crime, again, like Lee Chun-jae, the Hwasong killer, that's possible. But at the same time, I still think it was probably a premeditated act, and Kim had an accomplice. So other things that I think are kind of strange is that first of all, there was no suicide note, and not that I could find in any of the reports. Mm-hmm. You would think that, well, most people who commit suicide, unless he didn't view it as suicide, and that is the clincher. If you argue against it. But most people would have a suicide note or a note of some sort, especially if you're doing something like crucifying yourself. That seems pretty grand. It's a pretty grand thing to do to yourself, that you would just do it in secret with the help of maybe one or two other people, and you wouldn't display it in any way. It just seems odd to me that there wouldn't be a note of some sort. So that seems strange. But more in a more physical way, I'm not convinced that Kim, would have been able to drill a hole through his hand all the way through it, and first of all, hold his hand up and force the drill, because drills need force, right? So his hand, if he's holding his hand up, if he's up on the cross already, he would have to just hold his hand in the air, and it would have to stay still in order for the drill bit to go through.
Yeah.
If anyone's used a power drill before, they know that you need to secure it, and it works when you're drilling into a wall because the wall doesn't move. But if your hand is just up in the air and there's nothing behind your hand, it's going to start moving. It's not an easy thing to do.
No.
To drill a hole in your hand, I think, especially holding your hand up in the air. And seeing that he would have already been on the cross, and the police, by their investigation, they said that he drilled the holes in his hands last and then passed them through nails that he had already nailed into the cross. It just seems strange that he would have been able to do that, but then he'd have to drill his other hand with the hand that's already had a hole drilled through it.
Yeah.
Now, if anyone's had a hand injury, especially to a tendon, that it's very difficult to move your fingers. So what kind of strength would he have had in the hand that already had a hole drilled into it to allow him to hold the trigger down on a heavy power drill, one that was powerful enough with a bit big enough to drill through his other hand? It just doesn't fly. It's very, very bizarre.
The strength of faith.
The strength of faith. And you can come back, that's just as ridiculous. Yeah, they said we had this faith to do it, to endure the pain. You may as well just say it's the strength of faith, but it's nonsense. So it's really, really bizarre. So I don't buy that. So what may have happened is that this is what I really think happened. I think he definitely had an accomplice, and he was willing to commit the act out of what they call mortification of the flesh, a very extreme version of it. And this is a thing that Christians and different sects of the religion do.
Yep.
To show that they have their faith. They self-flagellation and wearing crowns of thorns.
Yep.
And even other cases back in history that go way back of attempts of self-crucifixion. And I'll get to that in a minute. But ultimately, my conclusion is I don't think Kim worked alone. I do think he had an accomplice or two. And they're very good at keeping it a secret. And they would have, for him to do it, he would have been he was willing to do it, and they were willing to help him carry it out. And the police had no idea what to say, or they botched their investigation, and they released this official result, this report that has massive holes in it that you can fly a Boeing through. I just don't buy it.
My thinking may be that maybe they might have seen that the instructions and everything were there, and that maybe they were seeing that as the guy trying to cover up for his accomplices, and they said, well, this guy really wanted to die so bad. They see it as maybe an assisted suicide, and like, well, let sleeping dogs lie. Those
That's possible, yeah. And see, that's interesting too, because no, I wouldn't. I was going to say, they often, because they don't report on suicides, but they're saying that it is a suicide. So yeah. Anyway, it's really, really bizarre. I just don't think the police report makes any sense. It's too questionable, and I don't believe it. Don't believe a word of it. But back to like the history of crucifixion, self-crucifixion. There's not really a long history of it, not that I know of, but there is a very famous case that happened in Italy in the early 19th century. A man named Matteo Lovat He tried to crucify himself twice in 1803 and 1805. And he was stopped both times. It was either the first or the second case where he nailed his feet. He got his feet nailed down to the cross, and then he was stopped. And once he did it the second time, he gave no reasons for it. I don't want to give it to it. I think the first one, it was the Feast of St. Michael, and I think that was kind of the reasoning he was trying to give for it, whatever it would have been in his mind at the time. But he was taken into a psychiatric ward in 1805, I think in Venice, or the doctor anyway who treated him was Venetian. And there were case studies done about him and what was going through his head. He died the year after. He died in 1806. But there is a good book that was released 2018 that's called The Man Who Crucified Himself. Very easy title to remember. But it's the subtitle is like Readings of a Medical. I'm going to see my notes. The Readings of a Medical Case in 19th Century Europe. So that book really highlights that and talks about that. And kind of maybe the psychological condition that Matteo Levat was going through that made him believe that he was needing to crucify himself. And it may extend to what happened to Kim in 2011. And then there are the crucifixions in the Philippines that still happen every year on Good Friday.
Mostly, I've been to them. The Moriones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Moriones Festival in Marinduque.
Oh, you witnessed them?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I looked a little closer. I don't think they were actually nailed, but they made it really look like they were. And it's very, especially if you're raised Catholic, it was quite intense. In fact, I shared drinks with the guy who played Jesus the year before.
What year was that?
I was there, I want to say 2011, 2012, 2013.
Okay. Yeah, it happens in different places around the Philippines that I know. Well, there was one guy.
The Moriones is the most famous one.
It's the big one. Yeah. Yeah, there was, you said that, like, I don't know, I've seen on National Geographic, there's a short, you probably find it on YouTube, there's a short documentary, 6 or 7 minutes, and they talk about it, and they follow one man who had his wife was giving birth in the 80s, and she and the baby were on the brink of death, and so the father started praying, devout Catholic, like most Filipinos are, started praying, and he said that if God saved his wife and his baby girl, he would crucify himself. And so they got through it. They lived, and he started crucifying himself year after year for years. I think that started for him. I think that was like in the 1990s. So in that documentary, they say at the beginning, it might be graphic for some people. You do see the nails going through his hands. They do nail.
Yeah, you can check. I actually have a video posted on my YouTube account, youtube.com/zenkimchi of the Moriones Festival. And I zoomed in a good bit to see if they were really nailed.
Wow. Yeah.
They do suffer. They do suffer, though. I mean, the carrying the cross through the streets and everything, and they're whipped and everything. They do suffer.
Yeah, it's the same thing. So, but there's the one guy too. He got crucified every year for 33 years, and the 33rd year was last year. So I don't know if I don't know if they did it this year. It would have been 34 years if it was Good Friday past.
I guess he's looking for a Guinness record.
Well, he stopped at. He said he was going to stop at 33 because those are the number of years that Jesus walked Earth. Yeah. So, but the big difference with those crucifixions in the Philippines is that those people don't crucify themselves.
No,
they are crucified. So, I find it very, very difficult to believe, considering all the circumstances, that taxi driver Kim on Easter 2011 in an abandoned rock quarry in Munjong, South Korea, crucified himself.
That is the weirdest game of Clue I've ever played.
I haven't played Clue in years.
Cluedo for our British listeners.
Cluedo. Yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, that was probably my my first introduction to mysterious deaths in Korea. So, but Joey, I know you have one as well. I'm going to share another one, but I'm very interested in yours because I know that your story is something I'm only slightly aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the details.
This is tough for me to get into too. This is one of those that's kind of I don't like revisiting it because it brings back some old feelings. This was anyone who was here as an expat in the mid 2000s will remember this. Is the death of Michael White in 2008. Michael White was just 14 years old, and he mysteriously drowned in a jjimjilbang, in a sauna in Gyeongsan City near Daegu. The pool itself is just 40 centimeters deep, which how much is that in
40 centimeters? Centimeter, not a lot.
Like you can couple drown. Of feet. It's a couple of feet. Right?
Like if you're face down in 40 centimeters of water, you can drown for sure.
Well, if you're face down in a bowl of
Jello.
Cream, yeah.
Right. But it's not a lot of water. When you stand, it's like it's below your knee.
And Michael was a large kid, tall,
not below your knee, be above.
He's a pretty big kid, and the autopsy said that the initial autopsy concluded he drowned under suspicious circumstances. They said they had no external injuries, nothing cardiac related, no brain disorders, even though they were trying to hunt for them because they're trying to find some reason he had a pre-existing condition.
He did have a pre-existing condition, did you say?
No, they were looking for one, but they couldn't find one.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but they still concluded he had one that they just hadn't found.
Jesus.
Yeah, this sounds very familiar to you.
Yeah.
He allegedly had been coughing and dry retching in the sauna, and no one was helping. There were 15 other people in the room at the time, and no one was helping him. And now let me put this out. Now, jjimjilbang, this is the part where people are naked. So the males and females are separated. So the mother wasn't with him at the time. They were separated after they entered. There is a law saying minors can't go into saunas by themselves, but there's no law saying that they can't be separated after they've already paid.
And how old was Michael? Did you say?
He was 14 years old.
He was 14, right.
This is at the Royal Hawaii Jjimjilbang in Gyeongsan, which I went and tried to search to see if it's still around. I couldn't find it. This was at night. Also, a little bit of context. This was during the anti-American beef protest, where there was lots of high anti-American sentiment at the time. The highest we've had. We haven't had it that high in a long time. The only other really high time was in 2002 with the deaths of the girls by the military,
the armored vehicle, the mark, yeah.
So they were able to get in touch with his mother while she was able to go out while they were putting him in the ambulance. They couldn't contact her beforehand, and the ambulance was not well equipped for resuscitation. They didn't have oxygen or defibrillator or anything, because they claimed that the sauna told them that the boy was already dead. They were just coming to pick up a dead body.
Oh, so it was one of those ambulances where there's no paramedic.
Yeah,
I've been in ambulances like that. They're not paramedics; they're just drivers.
Yeah. They were trying to do CPR on him, but they didn't have. But then there was no efforts to clear his lungs of fluid or anything like that. And so he was pronounced dead after he went to the hospital. police felt that there was no need for an investigation because they claim, people die in saunas. That happens, especially if they had previous health conditions, even though the autopsy said there was no previous health condition. They said there's no signs of body injury. Okay. So they didn't do it. The sauna, their side of the story, they said that workers saw him face down in the pool floating. They thought it was an adult man just screwing around.
Jesus.
Just doing a dead man's float. They ignored him, but they figured out something was going on, and they got others to help them drag him out of the pool. And this, when this came out, I mean, there's lots of suspicion. Not at the time. I mean, this is before coronavirus, and Korea has gotten this great reputation for its response to the coronavirus. But lots of bad things happened before it got to this point. And this is Korea had a reputation for playing fast and loose when it came to safety and precautions. Even the head of the fire department said, "Don't expect Korea to have the same standards for emergency equipment that they have in the U.S." Okay.
Even though they had the financial ability to do so.
Yeah, it was just ingrained. I wouldn't say Korean culture. It was just ingrained professional culture in this sense. Other people brought into question the Good Samaritan laws. Korea doesn't really have them, and I hate that word Good Samaritan so much. Do you know why I hate the word Good Samaritan?
No, I don't.
Okay. People think that a lot of people, when you hear Good Samaritan, they think Samaritan means like helper or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
When actually it's a racial slur. It's the Good Samaritan because in the Bible, Samaritans were known as people who were assholes, who were the enemy. And so, this was the Good Samaritan.
They were low rungs of society.
Yeah,
right?
he was, they were good for that type. I hate that word Good Samaritan, but it's in the vernacular. So yeah, we don't have Good Samaritan laws. So if you try to help someone who is injured and you accidentally hurt them, then you can get sued. You get in trouble. So people, when they see someone having a heart attack, they don't help. Now they're trying to change that. It's been over the years. It's been a lot more incidents have happened. But it's still an issue. I've had two friends, one recently, die of heart attacks, and I know one of them. He was in the subway station, and no one helped him.
God. Yeah, it's another episode right there.
Yeah. So this is what his mother Stephanie theorized, and this is such a bad time. It was such a dark time. This was during the anti-beef protest, and so there was a lot of anti-American, anti-foreigner sentiment at the time, xenophobic sentiment. Earlier that night, some boys from the school across the street from the Jinjabang were taunting Mike, calling him hamburger boy, and calling him cursing at him in Korean. She noted that when she first saw him in the ambulance and at the hospital, his hair heavily reeked of chlorine. So either there's an extremely chlorinated pool or something was going on. So she thinks some of the boys were in the sauna and they targeted him. And as a prank, they took some of the chlorine used for cleaning the pools and rubbed it in his hair. And they weren't prepared that that's a dangerous chemical, and he asphyxiated from that. And that's what she believes happened. But the police, the investigation concluded, no, this was a superhuman act. Somehow Mike beat himself unconscious and dragged himself into the pool.
Daft.
And drowned himself after light heart failure, which they found there's no pre-existing condition of any heart thing. But that's what the police concluded. The CCT footage, there was CCT footage, but it was inadmissible in court because the police didn't review it because the sauna said, there was nothing serious in the CCTV footage. You don't need to see it.
So the sauna said, Jesus. Oh man.
Yeah.
That's madness.
This is a very dark time. I got to know Stephanie well. This is the beginning of my other podcast, the Soul podcast. We did around 3 podcasts with her, detailing this. I'm not sure she's not listening now. I don't care. I think she went off. She went off the deep end on this one. She got very anti-Korea after it. She left Korea. I think she moved to Vietnam or Thailand. And she just got so dark after this, and it was really sad to see this happen to her. And at the same time, the expat community was disturbing, and that they all turned against her on this one too.
Really?
It was. I think we have a more positive expat community now, but back it was just a very dark time. It was like. No matter how much people can get screwed in Korea, expats will throw them under the bus first. It felt like it was a very dark time.
That's partially why I've been in this country for 20 years and I don't know anyone. I really like staying off the radar mostly.
Yeah.
Except now I'm doing a podcast. So
yeah, there we go.
Anyway,
that was the beginning of me just steering away from the expat community in general.
Yeah.
I became jaded after that. So we did we have a few soul podcasts. If you go on soulpodcast.com, I think for the Patreon subscribers, you get all those back episodes. It's for $5. I'm going to post, remind me, Sean, I'm going to post, the episodes I've done on mysterious expat deaths on the Dark Side of Soul Patreon account.
Okay.
I have Michael White, and there is and Stephanie did write an ebook about him. It's on mightymike.com, MIGHTIE Mike.com. She wrote about her experience. We also did an episode. We covered the deaths of Matthew Seller and David Bauer. Now, Matthew Seller, I was personally connected in a way, because I found this out much later. I was connected to it. I was at Gecko's with my friend Brant. It's back when I used to go to Gecko's, so that's a long time ago.
Well, explain Gecko's.
Gecko's is a bar, and I was just in Itaewon this week. It still exists. It's right in the middle of Itaewon, across the street from the Hamilton Hotel, right outside the station. Gecko's Terrace.
Nice rooftop.
It's the Mos Eisley Cantina of Seoul. It's where like all the scum and villainy of Seoul would show. I mean, if you need to find anyone, you go to Gecko's, because that's where all the expats and everyone stepped a foot in Gecko's at some time in their period in Korea.
Has anyone said to you, if you bumped into them, you said, "I'm sorry," like, "You'll be dead"? Anyone ever said that to you?
I don't bump into people. That's the thing.
Okay.
I'm careful at Gecko's, but I haven't been in forever. So I was there at Gecko's, and guy sat down and asked if one to talk to us, and it was a private investigator investigating this guy's death.
Oh, wow.
Asking if we knew anything. I said, no, good luck though. And then years later, I talked to a relative of his on the Soul podcast. I'm like, yeah, I talked to the private investigator you hired. Oh. You get to hear about his mysterious death. And then David Bauer, a British expat, died in 2003. They claimed he jumped off a bridge of suicide, but it was, again, mysterious circumstances. I think he was in trouble with the mafia or something at the time. And they wrote it off as a suicide.
Interesting.
I might go into detail on a future Dark Side of Soul podcast. In the meantime,
let's do that.
I'll post on our Patreon the interviews I had with the relatives. They get a little heavy, I warn you, but I have a hard time listening to them these days. It was a rough time. But anyway, we have mysterious expat deaths here. Yeah. And it also woke us up to that don't expect your embassy to help you when stuff like this happens.
Yeah. We've had disappearances of expats as well. I know a guy I knew a little bit. I didn't know him very well. I won't say his name because I just out of respect for his family. He died here in Seoul several years ago. Oh God, geez, how long ago was that? It's going to be 15 years ago. And it was ruled a suicide, but a lot of people didn't think it was. A bit mysterious, but there was no real investigation. They're like, no, it was a suicide.
They find it's either a suicide or some people had superhuman strengths, beat themselves unconscious, nailed themselves to crosses.
Yeah. Bizarre. Yeah. So, so Joe, how long have we been recording now? Is it an hour now?
Yeah,
it's an hour. Let's. How about we leave it here? We do this. Let's do a part 2.
Okay.
Let's do that because we don't want to go too long. So it's already an hour. Let's do a part 2 for next week.
All right, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
All right, everyone, you're seeing behind the scenes of how Sean and I decide shows. All right.
Because we're often just both too busy to really work out how the shows are gonna go.
No, in fact, I said, hey, let's record some shows. Let's do some short ones because our last ones have been very long. And then, we found some short topics and then they became mammoth.
An hour long. That's right.
As soon as we start doing a little bit more investigation, research, we just uncover so many things.
Yeah. So the other story that I'd prepared for today is one that I now and again share on the Dark Side of Soul tour. So, but I'm definitely going to talk about it in part 2 that we have now decided we're going to do.
All right. We'll do that. And I'll see if I can talk about the other ones, the other expat deaths.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. Excuse me.
All right. So anyway, thank you for listening. We if you want to hear more of our tales, go to darksideofsoul.com. We also have all of our other podcasts. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. Our music is by Sorak-san under the label Jeju Digital on Bandcamp. You can also get more of the music if you become a patron, starting at just $5 a month. If you go to patreon.com/soul podcast, the Dark Side of Soul. Yay. One more time. Patreon.com/Dark Side of Soul. Starting at $5, you get a lot of extra content, Weird Tales, Sean's Weird Tales series.
And my new one. Letters from the Dead.
Letters.
But that's for patrons only.
Yes. Sounds like a Ken Burns series.
I just came up with that because I was like, I want to do another series, something that's a bit loose, because Weird Tales from Korean Lore is structured. I write scripts for that. I record it here in my office, and I usually do it. I try to do them like in a single take and things like that. Very, very structured. But I wanted to do something that's a little bit looser. And it's like, I've been like, you and I were throwing around ideas for other content to put on the Patreon. And I was thinking something that's a little bit broader, something that we can include that's not just Korea, but somehow I can connect it back to things that are in Korea or things that are Korean. So I was like, I got so much content from antiquity and more modern history, letters and anecdotes.
It's your wheelhouse. I mean, you're a folklorist.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that stuff.
It's just sharing your passion, and other people who share your passion become patrons, and we all hang out together, and it's fun. It's
good times.
Group. It's a good group. We want to thank our top tier patrons: Angel Earl, Joel Bonomini, Jamie Staley, Sharon Cullen. Awesome. Also,
thank you.
If you've had a supernatural experience in Korea, we want to find out.
Let us know.
Yeah, Dark Side. Contact us through our Facebook page, facebook.com/darksideofsoul. You can do it that way. All right. All right. Well, until next week, guys, stay spooky.
Good night.